The microphone was handed to my mother during the family tribute portion of my cousin's wedding reception. I was seated 3 tables back, surrounded by extended family and people I barely recognized. She started speaking about sacrifice, about mothers who give everything, about daughters who forget where they come from. Then she said my name. She told a story about how I'd missed my grandmother's final months because I was too busy with work. She said I hadn't visited, hadn't called, hadn't cared. The room went quiet. A few aunts nodded knowingly. I felt my face go hot, but I didn't stand. I didn't interrupt. I just sat there holding my glass of water, staring at the centerpiece on the table. It wasn't true. I had been there. I had driven 4 hours every other weekend for 6 months. I had sat in that hospital room more than anyone, but no one in this room knew that. And I wasn't going to defend myself in front of 200 people. If you've ever had someone rewrite your story in public, maybe you know what that silence feels like. I'd appreciate it if you stayed with me through this. There's more I need to say. After she finished, a few people clapped politely. My uncle leaned over and whispered something to my aunt. She glanced at me and then looked away. I didn't cry. I didn't leave. I stayed in my seat and waited for the speeches to end. My hands were shaking, so I set my glass down carefully. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. When the music started again, I got up and walked to the restroom. I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. My makeup was still perfect. My dress was fine. I looked completely normal. I splashed cold water on my wrists and took a few slow breaths. I wasn't angry yet. I was just trying to understand what had just happened. I had been publicly erased. My mother had stood in front of everyone I grew up with and rewritten 6 months of my life, and I had no way to correct it without looking defensive or bitter. So I dried my hands, fixed my lipstick, and walked back out into the reception hall like nothing had happened. I had always been the one who handled things quietly. When my parents needed help with bills, I sent money without asking questions. When my younger brother got into trouble at school, I drove home to sit in on the meetings. When my grandmother got sick, I rearranged my work schedule every week to be there. I didn't announce any of it. I didn't post about it. I just did what needed to be done. But because I didn't make a show of it, it didn't count. My mother would tell people I was distant. She'd say I didn't care about family the way I should. She'd talk about how hard it was to raise a daughter who moved away and never looked back. None of it was true, but it was easier for her to say than to admit I had been helping all along. I had learned not to correct her. It only made things worse. So I stayed quiet and kept showing up. I thought that eventually the truth would be obvious. I thought people would notice. They didn't. After the wedding, I went back to my apartment and sat on the couch in the dark for a long time. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there replaying the moment over and over. I kept thinking about the way people had looked at me. The pity, the judgment, the quiet agreement. I had spent years trying to prove I was dependable, and it had all been undone in 3 minutes. The next morning, I woke up and went to work like nothing had happened. I answered emails. I sat through meetings. I smiled when people asked how the wedding was. I said it was nice, but something had shifted inside me. I wasn't angry yet. I was just tired. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of defending myself in my own head. Tired of caring what people thought when they didn't know the full story. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. I just didn't know what yet. For the next few weeks, I pulled back, not dramatically, just quietly. I stopped answering calls as quickly. I stopped offering to help before I was asked. I still showed up when it mattered, but I didn't go out of my way anymore. No one noticed at first, or if they did, they didn't say anything. My mother called a few times to talk about the wedding. She didn't mention the speech. She acted like everything was normal. I didn't bring it up either. I didn't know how. What would I even say? That she had hurt me, that she had lied. She would just say I was being too sensitive, that I was making it about me, that she was only telling her side of the story. So I stayed quiet and let the distance grow. I stopped expecting her to see me clearly. I stopped hoping she would acknowledge what I had done. I just started protecting myself. It felt strange at first, like I was doing something wrong, but it also felt necessary, like the only way to stay intact. One afternoon, I was going through old emails looking for a work document when I found something I had forgotten about. It was a message thread from 3 years ago. I had sent it to my mother and copied my aunt on it because I wanted there to be a record. It was from the month my grandmother went into the hospital. I had written out my entire schedule. Every weekend I would be there. Every shift I had taken off work. Every arrangement I had made to stay overnight when things got bad. I had sent it because my mother kept saying I wasn't helping. I wanted to show her I was. I wanted her to see it in writing. She never responded to the email. I had forgotten I even sent it. But now, staring at the screen, I realized something. This was proof, dated, documented, specific proof. It wasn't just my word against hers anymore. It was a record. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I saved it. I printed it. And I kept it somewhere safe. A few days later, I got a call from my cousin, the one who had just gotten married. She was helping organize a family reunion that was being planned for later in the year. She asked if I could send her some photos from my grandmother's last birthday. I had taken a lot of pictures that day. I was one of the only people who had been there. I sent her the photos, and we talked for a while. She thanked me for always being around when things were hard. She said she remembered how much I had done. It caught me off guard. I didn't think anyone had noticed. I didn't say much. I just thanked her and let it go. But after we hung up, I sat with that feeling for a while. Someone had seen me. Someone had remembered. It wasn't enough to undo what had happened at the wedding, but it reminded me that the truth still existed. It was still there, even if no one was saying it out loud, even if my mother had tried to bury it. It was still real. I didn't tell anyone about the email I had found. I didn't bring it up. I just kept it in the back of my mind. I started noticing other things too. Small comments my mother made that didn't match reality. Stories she told about me that were just slightly off. Little adjustments that made her look better and me look worse. I wasn't imagining it. It had been happening for years. I had just never paid attention before. I had always assumed she was misremembering, that she was just telling her version of things. But now I could see it was intentional. She was rewriting the past to fit the story she wanted to tell. And I had been letting her. I had been staying quiet because I didn't want to cause problems, because I didn't want to be the difficult one. But my silence had given her permission. It had made me invisible, and I didn't know how to undo that without making everything worse. So I waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The family reunion planning continued. My cousin kept me updated on the details. She mentioned that my aunt, the one who had been copied on that old email, was helping coordinate everything. She was the one organizing the memory boards and the family timeline display. She was asking people to send in photos and stories. My cousin asked if I had anything I wanted to contribute. I thought about it for a long time. Then I forwarded her the email, the one I had sent 3 years ago. I didn't explain it. I just said it might be useful for the timeline. She thanked me and said she'd pass it along to my aunt. I didn't hear anything after that. I didn't follow up. I just let it sit there. I didn't know if my aunt would remember it. I didn't know if it would matter, but I had put it out there. Not as a weapon, not as a confrontation, just as a fact. A documented, undeniable fact, and that felt like enough for now. A few weeks passed. I kept my distance. I didn't go to family dinners. I didn't offer to help with reunion planning. I just stayed in my own life and let everything else happen without me. It felt strange, but it also felt necessary. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was just protecting myself. I was tired of being misunderstood, tired of defending myself in my own head, tired of hoping people would see me clearly, so I stopped hopping. I stopped waiting for acknowledgement. I just focused on what I could control. My work, my apartment, my routines, my peace. I didn't talk to anyone about what had happened at the wedding. I didn't vent to friends. I didn't post anything online. I just carried it quietly and waited to see what would happen next. I didn't know if anything would change, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't keep showing up just to be erased. I had to protect what was left of myself, even if no one understood why. The reunion was scheduled for late summer. I hadn't decided if I was going. My mother called a few times to ask. I told her I wasn't sure. I said I'd let her know. She didn't push. She sounded annoyed, but she didn't argue. I think she assumed I was being difficult, that I was holding a grudge. Maybe I was, but it didn't feel like a grudge. It felt like self-preservation. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Done explaining, done defending. Done hoping she would see me the way I actually was. I had spent so much of my life trying to be good enough, trying to prove I cared, trying to show up in ways that mattered. And none of it had been enough, so I stopped trying. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a scene. I just quietly stepped back and let the distance grow. It felt like the only honest thing I could do, the only way to stop betraying myself, and that mattered more than keeping the peace. My aunt called me in early July. She said she wanted to talk about the reunion. I assumed she was going to ask me to help with something, but instead she asked if I had a minute to talk about the email I had sent years ago. I froze. I didn't know what to say. She said she had been going through the files my cousin sent her and found it. She said she remembered receiving it. She said she had forgotten how detailed it was, how clear. She asked me why I had never brought it up. I told her the truth. I said I didn't think it mattered. I said I didn't want to make things worse. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she thought it did matter. She said she wished she had paid more attention. She said she was sorry. I didn't cry. I just thanked her. I didn't know what else to say. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. Someone had listened. Someone had seen it. It didn't undo what had happened, but it meant something. It meant I wasn't invisible anymore. I decided not to go to the reunion. I told my mother a week before. She asked why. I said I didn't think it was a good idea. She didn't ask what I meant. She just said she was disappointed. She said people would notice I wasn't there. I said I understood. I didn't explain further. I didn't owe her an explanation. I had already given too many. A few days later, my cousin called. She said my aunt had put together a family timeline for the reunion and wanted to include some of the things I had done. She said my aunt was planning to mention it during the program. I didn't know how to feel about that. I wasn't going to be there. I wasn't going to hear it, but I told her that was fine. I told her I appreciated it. I didn't ask what my mother thought. I didn't want to know. I just let it happen. I had spent so long trying to be seen. And now, when it was finally happening, I wasn't sure I even wanted it anymore. I just wanted to be left alone. The reunion happened without me. I stayed home. I turned off my phone. I spent the day reading and cleaning my apartment. I didn't think about what was happening there. I didn't imagine what people were saying. I just focused on my own space, my own quiet, my own peace. A few days later, my cousin called. She said the timeline presentation had gone well. She said my aunt had talked about the email. She had read parts of it out loud. She had shown the dates. She had explained how much I had been there during my grandmother's final months. She said people were surprised. She said my mother didn't say anything. She just sat there. My cousin didn't say it, but I could hear it in her voice. The truth had been told, not by me, not in anger, just factually, by someone people trusted, by someone who had the receipts, and that had changed the room. It had shifted the story, not back to me, but away from the lie, and that was enough. My mother didn't call me for 2 weeks. When she finally did, she didn't mention the reunion. She didn't mention the timeline. She didn't mention the email. She just asked how I was. I said I was fine. She asked if I wanted to come over for dinner. I said I couldn't. She asked when I was free. I said I'd let her know. The conversation was short, polite, empty. I didn't push. I didn't explain. I just let the distance stay there. A few days later, my aunt called. She said she wanted to check in. She said she knew things were complicated. She said she hoped I wasn't upset about the timeline. I told her I wasn't. I told her I appreciated what she had done. She said she just wanted people to know the truth. I thanked her. I meant it. After we hung up, I felt something shift. Not relief, not victory, just clarity. The truth was out. I didn't have to carry it alone anymore. I didn't have to defend myself. Someone else had done it for me, and that meant I could finally let it go. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing from people I hadn't talked to in years. Distant cousins, old family friends, people who had been at the reunion. They reached out to say they hadn't known. They said they were sorry for assuming. They said they wished they had asked. I didn't know what to do with that. I appreciated it, but it didn't change anything. The damage had already been done. The years I had spent feeling invisible didn't disappear just because people finally knew the truth. But I accepted their apologies. I thanked them. I kept the conversations short. I didn't need their guilt. I didn't need their explanations. I just needed them to know that I had been there, that I had cared, that I had done the work, and now they did. That was enough. I didn't need anything else from them. I didn't need to be close to them again. I just needed the record to be straight. And it was. Finally, it was. My mother called again in late August. This time, she asked if we could talk. I said okay. She said she wanted to explain herself. I told her I didn't need an explanation. She said she thought I deserved one. I didn't respond. She started talking. She said she didn't realize how much I had done back then. She said she was going through a hard time. She said she didn't mean to make it sound like I hadn't been there. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I said one thing. I told her I couldn't keep being the one who disappeared in her version of the story. I told her I needed her to stop speaking for me. I told her if she couldn't do that, I would have to protect myself by staying away. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she understood. I didn't believe her. But I didn't argue. I just let the boundaries sit there. Clear, firm, non-negotiable. After that conversation, things didn't get better. But they didn't get worse either. They just stayed quiet. My mother stopped calling as often. When she did, she kept things surface level. She didn't ask me to come over. She didn't bring up family events. She didn't try to pull me back in. I didn't reach out either. I didn't try to fix things. I just let the distance be what it was. Some people might call that cold. Some people might say I gave up. But I didn't see it that way. I saw it as survival. I had spent years trying to be seen, trying to be acknowledged, trying to prove I was enough. And it had cost me too much, so I stopped. I stopped performing. I stopped explaining. I stopped hopping. I just existed on my own terms. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Not happy, not healed, just enough. And that was more than I'd had before. Life went back to normal, or at least a new version of normal. I went to work, I saw my friends, I kept my apartment clean, I started running again, I read books I'd been meaning to read, I cooked meals I actually enjoyed, I stopped thinking about my family every day, I stopped wondering what they were saying about me, I stopped carrying their version of me around in my head. I just focused on my own life, my own routine, my own peace. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a transformation. It was just quiet stability, and that was exactly what I needed. I didn't hear from my mother much. When I did, I responded politely and kept things brief. I didn't go to family gatherings. I didn't feel guilty about it. I just stayed in my own lane. And slowly, the weight I had been carrying started to lift. Not all at once, but enough that I could breathe again, enough that I could sleep, enough that I could feel like myself. I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were. I don't know if I want them to. What I do know is that I'm not invisible anymore, not to myself. And that matters more than being seen by people who never wanted to look. I stopped waiting for my mother to acknowledge what I did. I stopped needing her to. I just started living for myself, and that's made all the difference. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm just clear about who I am. Clear about what I will and won't accept. Clear about the kind of relationships I want in my life. And that clarity has given me something I didn't have before. Peace. Real, quiet, lasting peace. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. I know it wasn't an easy story to sit with. If you found something here that resonated, I'd love to hear what it was. And if you want to stay for more stories like this, I'd really appreciate your support. Thank you for being here.